Hey everyone, and welcome. So what if I told you that an animal's DNA is basically its life story, written down in a language we're just now learning to read? Seriously, its genes are this incredibly detailed script, edited over millions of years, that tells us everything: how it lives, what it eats, and what it needs to survive. So today, let's crack open the book on one of nature's most surprising genetic tales. And we're going to jump right in with a real head-scratcher. You've got the octopus, right? It's basically a genius of the sea. Super smart, a problem solver, a master of disguise. And then you've got a sea slug. It's a slug. So who do you think has the more advanced genetic toolkit for sensing its world through smell and taste? The answer is not what you think.
And here you have it. The predatory sea slug's genetic toolkit is absolutely massive. We're talking over 1,000 genes just for smell and taste. In the brilliant octopus, it has a tiny little toolkit, fewer than 150 of these genes. I mean, that feels completely backward, doesn't it? So what on earth is going on here?
Okay, to figure this puzzle out, we have to look way deeper than just the animals themselves. The real answer is hiding in their DNA, inside this special set of genes that basically builds their smell and taste toolkit.
The big study we're diving into today looked at this huge, sprawling family of animals with a mouthful of a name, Lophotrochozoa. Now, don't worry about that name, just picture snails, slugs, clams, oysters, even things like leeches and earthworms. Basically, they're everywhere, from the deepest oceans right into your own backyard.
So the star players in our story are a family of genes called Class A GPCRs. The easiest way to think about them is like a giant sensory switchboard. You know, every single gene is a little switch that flips on when it detects a specific chemical. That switch tells the animal, hey, food over here, or watch out, predator. So it makes sense, right? The more switches you have, the more you can sense.
And get this wasn't some small-scale study. The researchers took on this absolutely monumental task. They analyzed the entire genetic code of 238 different species from this group. It's only because they looked at this incredible scale, sifting through billions of genetic letters, that a hidden pattern finally started to pop out. So what was this amazing pattern they uncovered after all that work? Well, the answer turned out to be both powerful and, surprisingly, pretty simple. It had nothing to do with how smart an animal is or how complicated it seems on the outside. Nope, it was all about its lifestyle.
This is it. This is the big takeaway from the whole study. A clear, predictable rule just jumped out from all the data. You can just look at where an animal lives and how it makes a living, and from that alone, you can make a really good guess about how big its genetic toolkit for taste and smell is going to be.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. You can really see two paths that evolution takes. On one side, you've got expansion. That predatory sea slug is hunting in a really complex coastal world, so it needs to be able to detect tons of different chemical signals from its prey. So boom, its toolkit gets huge. But on the other side, you have reduction. A parasite like a leech, well, it just needs to find one type of host, so its toolkit shrinks. Same for a snail living near a deep-sea vent where there's not much to smell, it shrinks. And the octopus, it developed other amazing senses, like its ability to taste by touch with its arms. So this specific toolkit, it got reduced.
And you don't have to just take my word for it. The researchers themselves put it perfectly. They found this widespread pattern where these toolkits are always growing or shrinking, and it's all driven by what an animal needs to survive in its own unique home. It's literally evolution custom tailoring the senses for the job.
Okay, but that brings up a really big question, right? How in the world does an animal just get 1,000 extra genes? Is it just a fluke? Some massive genetic accident that just happened to be useful? The scientists knew they had to figure that out.
So yeah, what's the mechanism here? I mean, sometimes in evolution, an animal's entire DNA code just accidentally gets copied. It's called a whole genome duplication. And that can create a ton of raw genetic material to play with. So was that the simple answer? And after digging through all 238 genomes, the answer was a resounding no. This wasn't some random lottery win. These massive changes weren't an accident at all. They were something way more deliberate. The evidence against the big accident theory was just overwhelming. First, they saw these big duplication events were pretty rare and just randomly scattered. There was no link at all to the gene expansions. And the real kicker? Our sea slug, the one with over 1,000 sensory genes, there was no evidence it ever had one of these big duplication events. So that theory was out. So if it's not a big random event, what is it? Well, the answer is something way cooler and much more precise.
The real driver is targeted, super-fast evolution happening to individual genes, a process called positive selection.
So what positive selection means is that any tiny change in a gene that gives an animal a slight edge gets favored and spreads like wildfire. For these sensory genes, the specific parts that grab onto chemicals, the detectors, are hyperflexible. They can change and adapt incredibly fast, which allows an animal's toolkit to get perfectly tuned to sniff out exactly what it needs to find food, a mate, or avoid being eaten.
All right, let's bring this all home. This whole scientific journey has given us this amazing new insight into how evolution really works on the ground, and we can boil it all down into 3 simple rules for adaptation.
So after all this incredible research, here are the rules of the game for sensory genetics. Rule number 1, expand. If you're an active hunter in a complicated world, you build up your toolkit. Rule number 2, shrink. If you're a parasite or you live somewhere simple or extreme, you ditch the tools you don't need. And rule number 3, replace. If you evolve a cool new way to sense things, like the octopus and its touch-taste arms, you downsize the old system.
And that brings us right back to where we started. An animal's genome is so much more than a blueprint. It's a living, breathing storybook of its entire evolutionary journey. Every single gene that's gained, and every gene that's lost, is a page in that book, written by the world that animal lived in.
And that leaves us with one last really fascinating thought. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If we could read our own genetic toolkit with this kind of clarity, what amazing stories would it tell us about our own ancestors and the world that they managed to survive in?